Okay, I'm with Al Rojas. He's with Labor Council for Latin American Advancement and Sacramento chapter, and attended the AFL-CIO convention to put forward some resolutions around the comprehensive immigration reform. So, Al, why don't you talk about what happened the past few days you've been here and what your feeling is?
Well, obviously, we were going to support what was 23, which is in addition to re-strengthening the whole issue of against 744 from the U.S. Senate, which is mean and also doesn't talk about the real humane immigration reform. We don't agree with militarization of the border. We don't agree with slave guest worker programs. And obviously intact in that same bill was the whole question of E-Verify and secure communities. What was most alarming or concerns is the press conference held by the Los Angeles Federation of Labor, which is Maria Elena Durazo, who basically failed to admit to or mention the word that they supported the bill. What bill was the question? And when I asked her the question, then she admitted that the AFL-CIO and the Labor Federation of Los Angeles supported the 744, which is the bill that is going to spend $50 billion in the border and militarization of that border with an additional 40 to 50,000 agents, soldiers, or Border Patrol officers. That isn't coming to what, not even taking into account the whole question of the equipment being used to intelligence by these corporations that are going to reap a huge profit, and that profit will sustain, which will sustain more deaths in the border with that type of enforcement. As it is, there's been thousands of workers that have been killed, migrants, already yet now. Now they're going to extend the border another 700 miles, which will mean pushing more workers into dangerous parts of the desert in order to want to cross. But in yesterday's convention, there was a political move, underhanded move, in order to subvert or kill the efforts on 23, which is the bill that we were supporting, to mention that we basically didn't approve, opposed the 744, contrary to the Resolution 23 in the convention. But what the Resolutions Committee for the AFL-CIO did not allow a discussion, did not allow a debate on these issues, and also did not really fully give it an explanation to the delegates and to those who were observing the political move of killing 23 by so-called merger between Resolution 23 and by now expanding on Resolution number 4, which basically is totally out of line and undemocratic. So we find that to be very interesting, that they're so concerned about protecting the Senate Bill 744, which we oppose openly.
Now, you took a banner out on the convention floor. What happened? Why did you take the banner out?
Well, the banner was basically support S23. Resolution, okay?
Resolution 23.
Resolution 23. And all of a sudden, when we pulled out this banner, was during the time that they were discussing S23, but more so Resolution S4, which had nothing.
They merged the resolution.
They merged it. So when we did that, they called security, and the 4 or 5 security people came in and abruptly started to take our banner physically by trying to tear it away from us. So we had a tug of war of, no, you're not taking it away from us, and that created a bad atmosphere of denying us to be able to say at that moment when they're discussing with the delegates in their forum that we were being disallowed to show some support for it, when actually that's all we're doing. So they threatened us that they would either call the police or that they would throw us out of the convention, and similar to what we've gone through before. So we really felt that that was a real threat against us. about participating in a simple way of campaigning for S-23, the resolution.
Why were they afraid to have a discussion, and why was Durazo so angry with you when you challenged her on the bill?
Because that would mean we exposed, the fact that they support a corporate agenda and the ties with corporate America, and in the light of that, betray the unorganized workers and betray also the union workers and betray mostly the members of this convention. And these delegates understanding that they're not listening to, and we doubt in any way that they're familiar with the supporting the Senate Bill 744, which is basically a mean-spirited and also criminalizing immigrants and denying them their rights as workers and independence as workers.
Now, the FLOC, Farm Labor Organizing Committee, which is part of the AFL-CIO, and the United Farm Workers of America are supporting this bill. And what would it mean concretely to them as far as why they're supporting it and what the issues are?
Well, money. All they're concerned about union dues. They're not concerned about the welfare and the protections and also the involvement from the grassroots in taking that leadership. So you have a working class that has been, subjected to non-participation in their own union, and the union leaders, as was the case here in the AFL-CIO, who dictate from the top to the bottom, and the rank and file and the people at the bottom levels are not participating, and they're not being told the truth. They're lying, they're deceiving, and they're betraying. So this is an actual betrayal to the working class in this country.
And the contracts that they have with the government of Mexico for the importation of workers, farm workers, what are those?
Well, I was talking to one of the delegates. He was very surprised that he had none of this knowledge. The one, that the UFW and the FLOC become exclusive agents in order to become labor contractors and no longer unions in order to do in servicing the workers, but now contracting to the importation and being the agency to importation for the employers in this country and most corporations. In other words, they're no longer concerned in organizing workers. Why would they be in Mexico in the importation of workers for only one purpose, and that's union dues?
So it's pretty mercenary.
Exactly, and I think that I would swear 90% of the delegates in this convention do not know and have not read and are not aware, and it's being rubber stamped. And that's what you call the denial of participatory democracy and having a debate and a discussion.
Do you think that's the reason they don't want to mention that they support 744 openly?
Exactly, exactly. And what really they feel we are is a threat, because if we expose them and expose the real truth of the lies and deceiving the working class, then they're participating, they're complicit to the whole question of why the corporations are where they're at. How can we lay in bed with the very people who are anti-union, such as the National U.S. Chamber of Commerce and also the corporations, and being held to their complying to having these alliances and then supporting these slave programs in the importation of workers, when we have 25 to 30 million people without jobs, and here they are now bringing in a second-class human being and treated, inhumanely, and indicate now that this legislation, the Senate version of 744, being an immigration policy that's going to be beneficial to workers.
Now, you talked with some of the workers here, Local 11, Unite HRE, and what was their feeling about their union here in Los Angeles?
Well, it was very blunt. They said they have no faith.
Who was this? You talked to
this was an SCIU. No, it's they were asked me, I believe.
Here in this convention.
In this convention. And basically they were really angry that it's the same old politics, where the rank and file membership is not involved, and that all it is about how much money we can make and how much we can reap, and not really service the membership by giving away all the rights of the contract which they have and getting no results at all. So they're very angry and distrustful, and they see this as being sold down the river and being betrayed.
Now, at this convention, they brought in a new executive vice president, African-American worker, and they brought in other, what they call diversity, Latinos, Chinese, Asian, and they touted that as a real change in diversity of the labor movement. What does that really mean for workers in this country? Do you think that bringing in minority or immigrants into the leadership of the AFL-CIO will change the AFL-CIO?
Well, I really want to call it, no offense to those people who are, now involved at that level, is window dressing. Very typical of what happens in order to cure the image of an organization because they're in decline. And they're trying to, do that window dressing instead of spending or Richard Trumka coming up and saying, we're in a crisis, we need to spend money in organizing. I'm going to cut my wages by 50% from $400,000 to $200,000, and we're going to now go into an austerity program to organize working America, and then organizing workers out there in the unorganized sector. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is it's going to be the same old business as usual, and that we're going to continue going down in the steep decline, which is the case. And right now, that we consider a desperate situation right now, that they want to save their image. That's why the guest worker program is important, and that's why the Democratic Party, they believe, is important to them, because they expect the 11 million people to become citizens so that they can become members of the Democratic Party, or also solid, union members. But they got another thing coming. Unless you go into the communities to organize, nothing's going to happen.
And there are one of the two words that were not mentioned at this conference: capitalism and class struggle. Why weren't those words mentioned at this conference?
Well, those comments would be a threat to their political philosophy of the threat of working people. Even the word rank and file is a threat to many of the leaders up there, because most of their power comes from at that low levels. I wouldn't doubt the percentage is very high, that the delegates that are in this hall who are appointed by the paid staff, employee staff, at each of their levels in the union hierarchy. So what you have inside is questionable about whether you have rank and file. So rank and file is basically slowly being eliminated from the process, and you're having people who have a vested interest to the boss, and because the boss wants to continue in power and being elected.
Okay, so the future, you have a network. Why don't you talk about your statewide network, the conference that happened this weekend prior to the convention?
Well, we strongly believe that the direction that the federations, the union federations are taking is a mistake and an error, because they're missing out on people at the bottom level. But we need to deal with this new front and independent front of many organizations, especially into the areas of labor, is think in terms that there's no way out but move to develop an independent labor movement in this country, and also move to expand into building our own political party and a real labor party where it takes in the whole issue of workers having to have control of their own party and not belonging to the political parties such as the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because you do have Republicans that are delegates that are union members. It's a reality.
And there were a lot of foundations here. They had dinners, funders, sponsors for foundations and partnerships, private management partnerships, labor management partnerships, and foundations. What is that all about?
Well, again, it's a vested interest by the corporate mentality. Most of these groups, and one of them that I point to always is the National Council of La Raza. Basically, they are complicit with having to go out and solicit, millions and millions of dollars. You go into the webpage for the National Council of La Raza and some of these nonprofit groups, and they're reaping those monies from the very corporations that got us into the country and the problem that we have today. And now we have our own labor leaders also laying in the same bed with the corporations in this country, leading us down the path to destruction and the end of maybe possibly of the labor movement, with the diminishing of already 400,000 union members that the labor federations have lost just last year, and the state of Wisconsin and the states of Michigan to right-to-work states, and Ohio now leaning to a right-to-work state.